Will, we're never gonna get home, are we?
Alright, should be good to go. Good seeing you boys again. As I informed you guys, I did a little bit of a beautification on our thing now. So now we have little labels so people know what our names are.
Yeah, it looks good.
And yeah, I also turned the saturation up for the background image just because I thought that looked better. I realized that after I did it, I was like, it's ironic that I choose episode 3 to turn the saturation of the background up, because
Yeah.
is it just me, or does this episode have, like, they turned the saturation up? The whole episode feels orange.
Yep. That's like the first thing I noticed. It's orange, and it's like they color graded this episode, but this like the only one.
I know, it's so weird, right? And I was thinking about, like, why, and one of my theories on it is they use a lot of blue screen in this episode. You know, I think this might be one of the only episodes where a majority of the shots are like blue screen, because Dopey is in so many of them, and every single time he's on screen, that's a blue screen shot. So I don't know if because of all that the colors got wonked out, but yeah, it's interesting.
Worth mentioning, um, how expensive, like, I just realized this episode in particular, how expensive this whole episode must have been. It's like, it's just like totally stop motion. Even in like movies, they sparse, even in like in dinosaur movies of the time, they didn't really show a lot of dinosaur footage. They would have mostly just actors and,
Right.
there, but try to use them as little as possible.
Yeah, they definitely used a lot of the of their limited. They had 45 minutes for the first season, 45 minutes of stop motion. So they definitely used a good bit of it for this episode, and also a good bit of it on unique stuff for this episode, because everything, mostly every shot with Grumpy is like a reusable shot, that you've seen multiple times. But not really the case with Dopey, because I mean, how many times is Dopey really in the show? I mean, he's in a tag team, but most of the shots in this episode are unique shots that were shot for this episode in particular, and that you don't see reused again. So in that aspect, this episode is even more expensive, because, like, on a budget standpoint and also on a limited amount of stop motion that you're able to use standpoint.
Notes. I've got a couple, but I think they're mostly the same things you guys noticed.
Yeah, I think
Like
usually we're
Ray.
usually
Yeah.
we're pretty good at picking up on stuff. Yeah, but I always love it when someone notices something that the other guys didn't. One of the first things I saw was one of the first things in the episode is the big egg that they roll up on. So I'm pretty sure it's the same egg as they use in, like, you know uh the test. And then I think that's also in Pylon Express, at the, like, Pakuni compound. They have a big egg sitting there, which is cool because it ties in the, like, continuity of them using the egg for their ritual.
One episode, and I can't remember which one it was. There's one episode where Will hides inside eggshells of a dinosaur egg. Um,
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking
which
about.
one that was?
He hides from Alice, if I'm not mistaken, and it might be the test, but no, because it's not the test, because the egg didn't hatch until later. Or maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe if there was eggshells on the ground already. My gut is telling me the test, but I don't know. I'm sure I'm gonna find out while I'm editing this, because I'm obsessive like that. So I'll let you know once I know for sure.
One of the most interesting things um, they talk about the strawberries.
Yep.
Will says that Rick suggested it was because of the ground. What
Yeah,
What does that mean?
I wrote the exact same thing. I said big fruit. You know, Dad says it's because of the ground, and then question mark. Because yeah, this is one of the only times they directly like address it. You know, because like every other time you see big fruit, it's just like yeah, you know, big fruit. They just accept it.
Yeah. I think that in this show, they're trying to wrap their head around evolution. And they talk about it a lot at one point. That's the way of the jungle, only the strong survive. So, again, aside from, talking about birds being dinosaurs, they also, again, are in like the third episode preaching Darwinian evolution, which is pretty interesting.
That is cool. Yeah, I feel like they do a really good job at subtly yeah, like you said, having like cool educational stuff like that. And another cool thing about that scene in particular, I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but that's cool. I like talking about it in any order. The in that scene when he's like, they're talking about the fact that he died, and I just feel like it's a pretty mature thing for a kids show, like yeah. And then Will like shows like sadness about it, Will is like he's like I don't want to talk about it. Like it makes you sad, but then it's hilarious though because he goes from being sad to being like pissed off so quick when when the strawberries aren't there anymore and Dopey is.
I'm not totally convinced that is Dopey. Strong evidence of otherwise. I think Grumpy may have eaten Dopey, and that was a different brontosaurus.
Oh,
This is kind of crazy.
Dopey 2. This is red alert stuff right here. I'm intrigued. The second Dopey.
Yeah, I really think that might be the case. We've seen Spot outrun Grumpy, but people and other animals, the marshals, when they escape him, they either like hide behind a rock or they go in like a cave or they protect themselves somehow. Dopey has no form of protection. Even later in the episode, when Grumpy comes back, he requires the marshals to distract him.
Oh,
Grumpy.
you're
for him to escape.
right. You're right. I didn't think about that. And also in that scene, he was like he chose to hide. He didn't chose to run away. So that kind of shows that he knew that he doesn't have the speed to run away. Which I mean, you kind of would have assumed because a Celephysis is a lot more agile than a Brontosaur. They got a lot more weight to move around. That is something I had never even considered, but it's something that is totally plausible. Yeah, that I kind of like that. Yeah, the fact that they turn around and it's just a different Brontosaur, and it would make sense if Dopey was freshly hatched, then maybe it was hatching season, so maybe there were multiple babies running around the forest at that time.
Later, when they release Dopey, they get him to go away by yelling at him to get him to go away into the swamp, and then he does not follow them home.
Yeah.
But they get him out of the trees, yelling at him and scaring him off, and then he does follow them again.
That is an interesting point. Yeah.
Exactly, but it's an interesting take.
I definitely have more to say on the on them getting rid of him at the end of the episode, but I'll talk about that one later because I kind of want to save that one for the end. But for the other thing, yeah, do you want to be dinosaur stew? Yeah, had to say that.
That's a great line.
It's my favorite. It's so good.
While we're quoting, they don't teach pushing dinosaurs out of trees in Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
This is on Scouts instead of boys. There's nothing wrong with it. It just makes me feel weird.
Yeah, it's one of those lines. Yeah, that's I kind of feel the exact same way about when they say it's a baby Brontosaurus. Why does that
That's not how
line?
people talk.
Why does that line feel so weird? Yeah, that is why. It's just because that's not how people talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very very good. Also, another really funny thing about this episode, the very first thing that happens is they're trying to push the cart. They're trying to, and there's a rock under the wheel, and so it's like, that's funny. They didn't move the rock, and then he pushes it, and Holly gets knocked over and all that. But so they get blocked by a rock. Then I don't know if you notice, but after that scene, like when they push the cart next, they go the other way, and there is a second rock. There's a little tiny second rock that they drive over. This one doesn't get them stuck, but they drive over it, and so that's 2 rocks now they drove over. And then it happens the third time in the episode where they're like, trying to push the cart fast or whatever, and another rock catches them. Oh no, I remember when. It's when they don't know what's chasing them. It's when they hear Dopey coming, but they don't know who it is yet, so they just think it's a dinosaur. So they try to pull the cart, but it's stuck on a rock again for the third time. And so then they just hide underneath the cart, and then that's when they see that it's Dopey. But they got stuck on 3 rocks. So, like, look underneath the cart, guys. Another comment on that scene. That scene probably would have been scary the very first time you're watching it, Like, if you don't know it's Dopey, they do a good job. Like, they have the intense music playing, you probably think that it's like that it's either Grumpy or some other new dinosaur. But yeah, then it's Dopey, so yeah, it's great.
There implication in that scene that there's anything to be afraid of. They forgot to put sound effects in, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's another thing. I was like, I really listened to that. I ran the scene back and I tried to hear it, and you really don't hear anything. Yeah.
Episode has like a lot of slapstick humor, I think, compared to the other ones.
Yeah.
Like they used that Pteranodon, whatever transition thing, like 3 times or something.
Yes.
And it's like right after he says a joke, like it's some kind of a laugh track or something.
That's what I was about. I was about to point that out too. The fact that this episode has a lot of Pteranodon transitions, and but this is probably, I'm not probably, I know for a fact, this is the only time in the entire show where they look up at the sky and comment on the Pteranodons, which is really cool. It's really cool that they do that because they use it as a transition for the whole episode, but to use it as a transition and then have them talk about it, it's like kind of a fourth wall break. Not really, not an outright fourth wall break, but it's cool. It's a cool use of a transition. And yeah, no, they do not eat people, Will. They eat fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. Actually, I think it's pretty interesting. He claims that they eat meat, but we never see hurt anyone.
We never see him in general, besides the transition scenes.
Isn't that weird? I wish we saw more of them. Those would have been a cool dinosaur to include. Or, not dinosaur, but animal to include.
Yeah, for sure. But, that probably would have been a complex, special effects to do, especially if you try to do it with stop motion. And also because the subject of how pteranodons, like, walked and flew is like it's a hotly it's still kind of hotly debated now. We think we know probably like a good idea of how they did it, but especially with the super big pteranodons like Quetzalcoatl or like Quetzalcoatlus or whatever it's called. It's named after the South American god. It was the biggest pteranodon ever. It was the size of like a fighter jet, and it probably walked on like the tip of its wings, like its elbows, quote unquote, of what we would think of it as, and yeah, but what we think. But yeah, it would have been point is that would have been very difficult to stop motion, and also they probably didn't really understand it that much at the time because yeah, hotly debated.
That Quetzalcoatlus is no longer the biggest pterosaur. One
Oh, they
called
got a bigger.
Hatzegopteryx.
Oh, really? Nice.
Smaller. I'm not sure. It might be bigger or smaller. I don't know, but it's up there with Quetzalcoatlus, and it was so big. And of course, as Darkins with their incredibly large heads, it's so big and heavy that it couldn't fly. So it was like a terrestrial predator.
Terrestrial pteranodon. That is awesome. I'm definitely gonna look that up. A thing of note is this is probably one of Rick's first big brain moments in the show, even though it probably won't actually make the big brain compilation that I make eventually, because it's not Rick that's saying it. It's Will. It's Will explaining what Rick said, but Rick completely puts together that this is a pocket universe that is the equivalent of a lint trap of the cosmos. Before Enoch tells him, he does it. 3 episodes before they find out for sure. Crazy. Rick's a smart guy for how much he doesn't know.
No. He's just humble.
Yeah, you're right. He is just humble because most of the time he doesn't know. He's like, I don't know, Will, but if you touch that antimatter, we could blow up. Once Dopey finally does pop up for the first time, before Grumpy interrupts them. When they first meet Dopey, this is one of the only dinosaurs that Holly doesn't name, And that's ironic, considering it's like her favorite, probably. I think we can reasonably say that Grumpy is her favorite dinosaur. I mean, that Dopey is her favorite dinosaur. You were like, huh? Yeah, because she names Grumpy, she names Spot, and we don't know who named Emily, and we don't know who named Spike. Because both of those are ones that were named off screen, and but Will names Dopey, and Will also names Junior. But that one's kind of easy.
Speaking of Spike, when Dopey starts crying first.
I love that scene so much because every dinosaur in the whole valley can be explained with the eye emoji. They're all like, huh,
yeah,
huh, what?
It's weird. Well, they show Spot and Grumpy, and those make sense. Carnivore. Spot is an omnivore. They could have shown Alice. That would have made sense. But then they show Spike before. Just been Spike noticing.
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, but like the other dinosaurs are like intimidating. It's like, oh, they're gonna eat Dopey, and then it's like, and here's a Triceratops.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, but they also that also applies to Spot because they show Spot in that scene. And like we know Spot's not gonna do anything to them. But I guess you wouldn't have known that. You wouldn't have known that in episode 3. You wouldn't have known that Spot wouldn't have done anything. Yeah, and also, but to kind of play devil's advocate for what you said, on the other hand, it's like, yeah, he wouldn't have been a threat because he's a carnivore, because he's a herbivore. But on the other hand, they did establish last episode that Spot can be Spot can be threatening. Yeah.
You mean Spike, right?
Oh yeah, that is what I meant. Yeah.
Well. Also, later in the series, they do establish that sometimes Spot passes the Pakuni, and sometimes... and there was that one episode with Burgard Jackson where he is intimidating, not really like going to hurt him.
Yeah.
Intimidating, but You know.
I think that was Spot being curious about what was going on. You know, I think that was Spot just seeing something dangling from a tree and being like, "What is this?" You know. Appropriate that we bring up Hurricane, because did you know that yesterday was the 48-year anniversary of Hurricane, which means we are coming up on the 48th anniversary of Circle, which aired on December 26th, aired the day after Christmas of '74. What a Christmas present!
Yeah, right. I was gonna say that. Wow.
That they will correlate, you know, of to one of the release dates. Circle would be appropriate, but I'm not suggesting that will happen. I'm just saying I hope.
Right.
But I'd be happy for it to come out anytime. I don't care. I just want it to happen.
I imagine when we get to the episode where we talk about Circle, it's gonna be like an hour and 30 minutes long. like that one's gonna be stupid long because there's so much to dissect. Like every line of dialogue in that episode is like there's a whole theory behind it. Yeah, but
Seriously.
but that's another time. Back to Dopey. I wrote in all caps, he's so cute, the poor boy is stuck. Because that's just my genuine reaction. He's stuck in between the trees, Grumpy's coming, he's crying, it's like, oh no, he's so cute. And really good stop motion. Like you said, they used a lot of unique stop motion in this episode, and this is one of the examples of it. Because Dopey being in between the trees, like thrashing, you know, he totally looks like an animal that is stuck and defenseless, and makes you so sad, makes you care for him. Good job, writers. Oh, we didn't even say that, did we? I like to say who wrote and directed the episodes at the
Who was on this one?
beginning of this episode. This episode was directed by Dennis Steinmetz, and that is he directed the first 4. He directed all the way down to Downstream. So he did the first 2, Dopey, and then also Downstream. But this episode was written by Margaret Armen. So thank you, Margaret. Oh, look at that! How appropriate! You know what episode she wrote? Tar Pit.
Oh.
She gets all the Dopey episodes. I love it. She wrote both of the Dopey episodes. Those are both of the Dopey episodes, right? There isn't another episode solely dedicated to him, right?
Yeah, those are them.
Because as I learned recently, though, he is in other episodes, because I found out that I forgot to put in I Don't Know Will in my I Don't Know Will compilation. I felt so ashamed. It was really funny the way that I found it, too, because I just decided that I wanted to watch I decided to watch Pylon Express, because I love Pylon Express. And so I was watching Pylon Express, and then he says, I don't know, while they're hiding in the bushes, and I instantly recognized it as one of the ones that wasn't in my video, because I know every I don't know from the series. So and then I went back to my video to look at my mistake, and that the mistake is like halfway through the video. The mistake that I was thinking of. But then when I rewatch it, it turns out there's a mistake at the very beginning of the episode also, because now that I had just rewatched Dopey for this, I realized that in the scene at the beginning where I said that the clip was from Dopey, I knew instantly that it wasn't from the episode Dopey, because it's the scene in question is Rick standing next to the cart with them, and he says, well, I don't know about you guys. And I instantly recognized it as not being from Dopey, because there is not a scene where Rick is standing by the cart with them in the jungle, because it was in the jungle. The only scene where Rick is standing by the cart in the episode Dopey is, by the cave, when he's like, this better be a good story, So I didn't know what episode it was from. I was like, what episode uses the cart you know, like, and
Right.
that isn't Dopey, and it turns out it was tag team. So, not only, so not, because at the very beginning of the episode they're using the cart, which makes sense because they're using the cart to put the carrots on, and then the Pakuni roll up and are like, carrots, you know, gimme. But so, not only did I forget, and I don't know, Will, I also mislabeled the clip from Tag Team as being from Dopey. So, it's a good thing that I discovered that, because now I will upload a fixed video.
Cool.
Speaking of, I don't know, in this episode, around the end, it gets like super serious all of a sudden, and Holly says, "Will, we're never gonna get out of here, are we?" And then Will responds, "I don't know, Holly. I just don't know." So we know where Will gets that from.
What you just said is my favorite scene in the whole episode, and it has nothing to do with the episode in general. It's so good. By my count, it's the first, because another compilation I'm making is the serious moment compilation. By my count, this is the first really serious moment in the entire show. Because I'm not counting stuff where they're like,
Really cool.
I'm not counting stuff where they're like screaming like grumpy, you know, like, because it's all a little over the top. I'm talking about really moments that give you goosebumps. Moments like in Downstream, where they first are going into the cave, into the where Rick holds the thing with the stick, and he's like, "You go get Holly," like, and Will is like, "What about you?" And he's like, "I said go," like he's putting them before him. That moment gives me chills, and so does this when Holly's like, "We're never gonna get home, are we?" Like it's like you said, it's out of nowhere, it's serious, and it's like my favorite thing ever.
Yeah, this is kind of a Will episode. Will has a lot of good moments. He also says the line, "Run, Holly, run." So we get a little bit of that there.
Iconic.
Yep. And Will also has a lot of jokes in this episode. Let's see. And he does, yeah, Will does like a lot of explaining. Like he explains what Rick says.
Yeah, I feel like Will is often used as to use an example. It's kind of like how Doctor Who uses the companion, the Doctor's companion, a lot of the time as the character that is playing the role of the audience, because they're there and they ask questions so that the main character can give you exposition, so that the writers can write explanation into the story without their main character just talking out of nowhere. You know, Will is often used in that way because he's often like, "Well, how, Dad?" or "What do you mean, Dad?" You know, and Holly in the same way, but I feel like to a lesser extent because she's the younger, you know. I love so much when they first pull up to the cave and Dopey is following them, and Rick's reaction is priceless. It's so funny. It's one of the funniest moments in the show, really. It's up there with when he's dodging Slee Stack arrows, and he's like, "Now I see why you guys are so angry. You're such bad shots." But in this scene, he's like, they're like, "Well, he's a brontosaurus," and he's like, "Oh yes, I can see that." And then
That was one I was watching it, and I quoted that as I was watching it.
yeah,
I love
oh
that.
yes,
I love
I can see that.
Oh yes, I can see that.
And then, "Can we keep him?" And then ... where? It's like, what do you think this is? It's so good. but then
in that moment, I love it.
But then when he's like, I mean, we can't make him leave. He'll stay wherever he wants to stay. And then Holly is like, "Did you hear that? You can stay." I love that Dopey shows visual excitement. Dopey like kicks his arms up in the air and he's like excited. Like,
He rears up.
does Dopey understand English? New theory.
And well, I mean, thing. Promorphize the animals. In like, there. Do you remember that one scene with Zarn? The one where Grumpy being a bird, says to Grumpy, "Yeah, what you need? A good scratch. But before you scratch, you need
a
a good
good
itch."
Yeah.
And then Grumpy starts scratching his neck. So does Grumpy understand Zarn? Does he understand English?
That is a good question also, but I don't know, I always took that scene as being some sort of Zarn trickery. I don't know. I kind of cuz Zarn comments on how small his brain is. And so and being that we know that Zarn is on such a higher level than humans, I always took that scene as meaning he is able to take some sort of mind control or some sort of hypnosis only over small intellectual beings such as Grumpy. You know, I took that scene as some sort of brainwashing myself.
Cool.
But yeah, I love that. I love that scene so much. You know what else happens in this episode? So Dopey gets to stay, and then they have the scenes where Holly is like, you know, riding on Dopey and stuff, and which is pretty. Which
Of course, used in every episode.
yeah. Well, you're right. Technically, it is used in every episode in the ending credits.
In two at least.
What'd you say?
Two at least.
Ah,
Season 3. They just forgot Dopey existed, which really makes me upset.
yeah,
They just stopped using him.
yeah. You know, really, Dopey should have had more episodes.
Justice for Dopey.
Justice for Dopey. That's hilarious. But a big thing the thing I was gonna say. Will uses the stick. Red alert! We have another instance of the stick being used. We're doing a stick watch every time the stick is on screen prominently or being used. We're gonna comment on it, and yeah, Will uses it this episode, and yeah. Also in this that image, I don't know if you guys have watched episode 2 yet, but that image, Ray, that you said that you posted on the wiki, you were right. All you gotta do is Google Land of the Lost High Bluff, and it's like the first result on Google Images. And yeah, it's a great picture, really good shot of the stick with the sound stage sky in the background, and that happens also in this episode, but instead of it being Holly, it's Rick and Will with the stick in the shot, and you can also see the sky, but it's nighttime in the shot, so it's not as prominent. You know, in your picture it's daytime, so you can like clearly see where it's like not sky or where it's supposed to be sky. You know, yeah.
We're gonna solve the mystery one day of the stick. I know they use it in the one, I think it's Gravity Storm, where they're using it to like pull clay pots up to the cave.
Oh
So
yeah.
they use it quite a bit, don't
And
they?
then the gravity hits, and then they drop the pots. Yeah, it's official. I'm making a compilation of the stick. I'm making a stick compilation. It's coming at you, boys.
Every time used.
Yeah.
There's a part being attacked. It cuts to the inside of the cave where Holly says, "Oh, please, Grumpy, don't eat him." And when it cuts to the inside of the cave, the music just stops. And then when it goes back to the outside of the cave, it starts up again.
That is an interesting detail that I didn't notice.
I've never noticed it before. It's not. It's actually hidden, but it's once you. It's very interesting.
I'm definitely gonna run that back, and I'll play that right now.
Oh, please, Grumpy, don't eat him!
A really funny moment from this episode that I had noticed before is how messed up the scaling is on that one shot. You know the one shot I'm talking about, where where Holly is outside of the cave, and it's when she goes outside to sleep with her sleeping bag, and then Grumpy comes, and then Rick is like, Holly, get up here, and then she goes up there, and it's around 16 minutes and 15 seconds in the episode. They do a wide shot, and the scaling is just off. She goes from being standing like on the first rock at the very ground level to being on like the third rock, like the one that's like right next to the cave, and she didn't move at all. It's supposed to be the same position. And then because right after that wide shot they cut immediately back and she's back on the bottom rock again. And then also in that same wide shot, Will and Rick are taller than the cave entrance. Like they're like 8 feet tall in that shot. So it's a very, very good. It's not the first time it's happened. The scaling was messed up in that. I think the scaling was messed up in one scene in Chaka also. It's when they have to do wide shots of them standing outside of the cave entrance on a high bluff. That's when the scaling is messed up, which makes sense because it's a miniature. Because there's the miniature of High Bluff that they made, and then there's the actual set of High Bluff that they filmed the outside. They had the outside set and the inside set of Inside of the Cave. Interesting lore thing. This is the first time that Emily is named, and it shows that Emily already had a name. Like Spike, like we were saying earlier, they both got named in between episodes, it seems.
And I suppose it's probably been quite a long time since they had time to build a whole cart. I mean, I imagine that took a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
Because how about like carving those wheels? Gotta make those.
And the green screen is, yeah.
Oh, so this is an interesting question. Have you guys ever seen any bamboo growing? Like you've seen bamboo growing in the background? Okay.
Tar pit.
Oh, okay.
The chop down.
Yep. You're right. They do. Okay, yeah. Well, that makes me happy because that is a common thing, that very common building material that they use in the land. They use it for their the water collection system. They use it to build the cart that we were just talking about. They use it to build the basket that gets destroyed by Grumpy. They use the bamboo for a lot of things. So I wasn't sure if I had actually seen bamboo growing before, but yeah, you're right. They do definitely chop some down in tar pit. One earlier that I forgot to mention was when they first saw Dopey, when they were arguing over the gender of it, of Dopey. That's just a funny scene because it's another classic sibling bickering moment. And if you listen, it's funny because they go back and forth, and then eventually Will gives up and says, "Yeah, she's pretty dopey." But then Holly turns and spins it on him, and you're right. Yeah, anything that dopey has to be a boy. We'll name him Dopey. So yeah, this is a funny moment. Like you said, kind of. This episode is kind of funny. A little high on the comedy, not as much as on the drama. But then, although on the other hand, when Grumpy's coming and you're not sure if he's gonna get him or not, my heart starts beating. Stuff's intense.
Mm-hmm. You get attached to Dopey so quick.
Oh, he's so easy to get attached to. I mean, after that one shot, that one iconic picture of Holly standing next to the puppet of Dopey, where it's like Holly, Dopey puppet, right next to each other. It's normally used as like the thumbnail for the episode because it's such an iconic shot. After that, it's all over. He's so cute. When they first walk up to the swamp, Holly is like, "Are you sure he's gonna be safe here?" And Rick is like, yeah, I don't think Grumpy likes the swamp very much. Will says, that's because he doesn't have any lifeguards. What?
Good one.
What? That's
Good
another
one,
that's
Will.
another one of those moments that I'm like, what? That doesn't sound like human. That doesn't sound like I'm like, what's the joke there? There's definitely a joke there. It's either that it's because there aren't any lifeguards for Grumpy to eat, or there aren't any,
Yeah, what is he trying to say?
or because Grumpy can't swim and he needs lifeguard. I don't know, but it's not very funny. It's weird.
It does not work.
It doesn't land, yeah. Which is hilarious. Final thing that I have anyway. It's like one of the final moments. It is the final moment in the show. It's when she's shooing Dopey away. Go on, get out of here. I don't want you anymore. You know? That's a TV trope. That's the shoe the dog trope, And I remembered it from the movie Air Bud. I don't know if you guys
Yep.
remember Air Bud, but they do that exact thing. She almost directly the same lines. Get out of here, I don't want you anymore, And so I thought it was from Air Bud, but then I was like, after 2 seconds of thinking about it, I was like, Air Bud came out in 2000 and like something, and this came out in 1974. So I'm like, what was the thing that did it? And so this sent me on a whole journey of trying to find out what the first. It's been used in so many things. SpongeBob did it, like Avatar did it, like so many iconic series and movies use this trope of having to send away an animal or a loved thing because it's better for them, but it makes you sad.
The episode of Pokemon. That one.
Oh,
Forget
yeah.
that one. That one hit hard.
There you go. There you go. They do it in Pokemon, yeah. But all of these examples are like, 2000 examples. So I was like, what's the original? Because, I had to find something older than 1974 because that's when Land of the Lost did it. And I was fairly sure that Land of the Lost wasn't the thing that invented the TV trope, right? So I looked it up and I found a website that has all of them listed out, like a bunch of examples. Probably not all of them, but a bunch of examples. And there aren't many that are older than 1974. Like, I don't know. Like, it has to be. It has to be something. I saw people online saying that it was used in the TV show, Lassie. Which is like a TV show from the 50s and 60s about like a dog who like saves the children from whatever mischievous things they get into. The dog is named Lassie and it's the main character. And I found people online on websites saying that they do it in Lassie. There's an episode of Lassie where he has to send her away and he's like, "Go, get out of here," And that show is from like 1950 something. So if that is true, that would likely be the first example. But I couldn't actually find the clip. I really wanted to find the clip. So yeah, moral of the story is that's a TV trope. It's called the shoe the dog. It's called the shoe the dog trope, and I'm not sure on what the first thing that did it was. And like I said, I'm fairly sure it's not Land of the Lost because it looks like you can tell that they're quoting something in that scene, But
if it started, if it's called Shoe the Dog, it's got to be.
It's got to be Lassie. Yeah, exactly. That
sounds right. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, yeah. But like I said, I couldn't find the actual episode. Like, as hard as I looked up like Lassie, I don't want you anymore. All I found was all of the other examples that I had looked at. There's some movie called White Fang, where they do it. There's so many movies, but I could not find the specific. The only thing I found online was other people saying, "Oh yeah, they do it in that episode of Lassie," which maybe it's just not a thing that's online because it's a show that was from the 50s and 60s. And, a lot of the time, things from back then don't get preserved, sadly. that's the case with a lot of early Doctor Who episodes. There are many early Doctor Who episodes that the BBC just re-recorded over, so they don't exist anymore in the archives. Lost media.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of lost media, I feel like I should talk about the one of the things that came to my attention recently. It was this guy. Let me pull it up on YouTube so that I know his name. It's this guy from the Facebook group chat called Dan Krantz. And Dan Krantz recorded reruns of Land of the Lost from 1985. They aired in 1985, and he recorded them. And it's the coolest thing ever, because I cannot express my joy at watching Land of the Lost and seeing the retro commercials, seeing the commercials pop up in the episode where they're supposed to be. He uploaded it to his YouTube channel, Split Personality, and it was Split Personality. It's like my favorite episode ever. So it's so good because, in the scene where something intense happens and then it's like dun 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 and then it fades to black, it actually goes to commercial instead of just cutting back. It's crazy. It goes to commercial, and it's a commercial about Rice Krispie treats. It's all like cheesy and stuff in 80s. It's great. And so it just made me feel like a kid on Saturday mornings watching it with the actual commercials. And also made me think, these commercials are likely lost media if not for him. I mean, maybe the executives down at Rice Krispie have a vault with their commercials from the 80s saved, but probably not likely. I would think that if it wasn't for Dan Krantz, these commercials would be lost. So yeah, very, very epic. Thank you, Dan. He uploaded Split Personality, and then I commented on how much I loved it, and he said he had a few more. And I was like, I'd love to see any more that you have. And then he said, I just uploaded Blackout. So on his YouTube channel, he has Split Personality and Blackout with commercials. Even if you just skip to the points in the episode where the commercials are, because, we've seen Split Personality. As much as I love Split Personality, I'll watch it a million times. But if you don't want to watch the whole episode, just skip to where the commercials are, because then you can watch the commercials, and it's great. And but also watch the very beginning, because at the very beginning it's not a commercial, it's a in the news segment. It was like an educational
Whoa.
Yeah, it's so cool. It was like an educational segment that they put before the episode for the kids at home. In this case, in the case of Split Personality, it's one about Thanksgiving. It tells the story of the Pilgrims and all that. Just a little 2-minute clip before the episode starts, before the theme song. But yeah, really cool. Really, like I said, puts you in the place of being a kid in the 80s, in the 70s/80s. Would have been different commercials on the original broadcast, obviously, but still very, very retro, very cool. Yeah, that would be insane. Imagine if someone had a broadcast of like the 1974. Like, imagine if someone decided to record the original broadcast of Dopey because they were like, ooh, new show, let me record this, But no one did that because recording stuff back then was so difficult, That's why it's the same thing with, that's why episodes of Doctor Who that have been lost, some of the only ways that they are recovered, lost episodes, are when they've been recorded by fans. And obviously that's rare. But it does happen on occasion. Like, there's this one Australian Doctor Who fan who, like, if it wasn't for him, like, 7 different episodes of Doctor Who from the 60s would be, like, gone forever. So, like, yeah, shout out these guys that were recording stuff back in the day, in the 60s and 70s.
I don't know if I mentioned, but I have a Star Trek class at school right now. So I'm, as not as required homework, just to extra credit, I'm watching like all of the Next Generation right now.
That's awesome. I haven't watched The Next Generation. I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan of Star Trek: The Original Series, and but
It really is
I've never seen The Next Generation. You said it's really good?
wonderful. Really, I love it.
Yeah, every time I see clips of it, it always looks so good. It looks like I would definitely love it. Yeah, that's on my need to watch list also. Yeah, I loved Star Trek: The Original Series even back before I knew about the heavy connection that Star Trek and Land of the Lost have. You know, obviously with the main one being David Gerrold, writer of the episode "The Trouble with Tribbles," being the person who created the whole show Land of the Lost. But then David Gerrold taking his friends from the Star Trek scene, people that he knew who had helped write episodes of Star Trek the original series and of Star Trek the animated series from like the 70s to write on Land of the Lost. Yeah, so Star Trek and Land of the Lost are like that, you know. Which is great because I love them both.
Yeah. My Star Trek teacher, she has she has like some tribbles in her room, some like little stuffed tribbles, and on the first day, she asked everybody. She was like, "Okay, what's your connection with Star Trek? What do you know about Star Trek?" And
that was your in.
Like, all right, so get this, tribbles, right?
Guess who made them?
And like all of Land, yeah.
What it got?
Yeah.
One man created two iconic things. This boy, and the tribbles.
Critter. Yeah. Yep.
We love you, Gerald. And we also love you, Margaret Armen, for directing this episode. I mean, for writing this episode, sorry. Dennis Steinmetz directed this episode, as he did with the first four. That's an interesting thing to comment on. It seems every single episode in this season, in season 1, was directed by either Dennis Steinmetz or Bob Lally. Dennis Steinmetz directed the first 4 episodes, and then he also directed Hole, and The Search, and The Possession, and Follow That Dinosaur, and Elsewhere and Circle. All bangers. And then everything else I didn't mention, which would be Stranger, Album, Skylons, Paku Who Came to Dinner, and Stone Soup, and Hurricane, are all directed by Bob Lally. Mostly bangers. Couple of meh in there. Couple of Stone Soup,
Yeah.
Paku Came to Dinner, you know. Those are the low points of season 1 for me. But yeah, what are your guys' closing overall opinions on this episode?
It's good. It's nice. It introduces us to Dopey. There's some classic Land of the Lost tropes in it.
Very funny.
Normally humorous for Land of the Lost. Great episode, but good episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. It's very middle of the road. It's definitely not my top 10.
Yeah.
Nate, but
I didn't have it in my top 10. I know I overranked it, but I didn't have
S tier. I mean, or
yeah.
whatever.
Well, yeah, that's what I was about to say. Upon rewatching it and after watching the first 2, I do think it's a little unfair to have this episode above Sleestat God, even if I do only have it literally one ranking above Sleestat God, because the way I have it is I have Sleestat God at the very top of the mid tier, and then I have Dopey at the very bottom of the next tier up, which I labeled as like amazing or something like that. So I have Dopey as like the very worst amazing episode. But upon rewatching it, I think it's a little unfair to say that this episode is better than Slee Stat God. So I'll probably fix that in my tier ranking. But you know, I got a soft spot for Dopey. What can I say? It's a very cute episode, very funny episode. But yeah, if you guys don't have any more, I think we're good. So next time we'll be covering Downstream. So exciting. That one is, I've been looking forward to that one. A lot of lore to dissect in that one. A lot of great moments. Can't wait.
Fun one.
Yeah. Alright, well, I'll see you guys later. Nice talking, as always.
You guys have a nice night.
Yep. Merry Christmas, all that, by the way.
Yes, sir. Merry Christmas.
Holidays. Yeah.